All right, I believe we are live now. I think so because my heart rate just went up. And we are now recording as well. So just as a heads up for everybody who's on that we are in the world right now, fully in cyberspace. All right, YouTube channel looks good. Everybody looks good over there. We're on a little bit of a delay. Great. Okay. All right, we'll wait just one more minute. There's still quite a few people calling in. Looks like we have some people joining on YouTube as well. Monica, I'll give you a few second warning here too, since you'll be one of the first ones. Alejandro, are you ready to go? Okay. All right, let's get launched. Thank you, everybody. There's always a minute while we check the technology and get everyone in. I just want to thank you, all the panelists that you can see right now, and everybody who's joining us via YouTube and through the Zoom broadcast. Thank you all for being here. This is our official launch of the Central Grasslands Roadmap Summit. My name is Matt Gray, and I'm the director of the Rocky Mountain Innovation Lab and a facilitator for the summit. But before saying too much, I want to be sure everyone has as much access to today's event as possible. So I wanted to hand it over to our incredible interpretation team and let Alejandro walk us through some of the different options for interpretation today. Thank you, Alejandro. We cannot hear you though. And Alejandro, the attendees are actually having a hard time hearing you now. I think the panelists can. English channel if they've got it. Okay. Yep. Yeah, so folks in the attendee and panelist world, down on your bottom panel for your webinar, there should be a globe that's showing up just to the right of the Q&A button. And that one is where our interpretation feature is. And if you click on that, there's an English and a Spanish channel. And you want to be on the English channel at this point if you are looking for English. And if you need interpretation, you want to click over to the Spanish channel, which is where Alejandro and David will be translating from. Okay, I'm getting a couple of heads up now from chat that we've got it there. Okay. And so attendees, please continue to use that chat feature to let us know what's going on and check in with us there. Alejandro, any other pieces that you want to share, or David? And you can also watch with the YouTube live broadcast that's happening, and that web address is linked on the website, grasslandsroadmap.org. And that's the easiest way to go back and find us from there as well if you need to. Okay. So thank you, Alejandro, and we'll work through. We all know sort of in this COVID-19 world, we are still figuring out all the tech pieces sometimes as we go and learning new things and trying to make a summit that works tri-national and engages and involves a lot of people. So thank you for your patience as we launch here. And as we move into the collaborative process, I want us to recognize and hold space both for the excitement about what we're going to embark on and the complexity of it, the overall complexity of collaboration, and the ambiguity also of what we're doing. I think a lot of people are curious, what is the roadmap and what's it going to look like for the Central Grasslands? And we just kind of want to hold space for that excitement and that complexity and that ambiguity as we move forward. And also at the root of collaboration is a willingness to work outside of our own interest areas and truly hear and acknowledge the ideas, insights, and experiences of our fellow collaborators. And so there's no more important place than to launch this collaborative initiative than with a land acknowledgement. And I want to bring up Monica Terkildson from the Oglala Sioux to open our summit. Monica?
Good afternoon.
Monica, I'm bringing up your video too, just so you have that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I want to say good afternoon to everybody and just say that, you know, one of the things I want to share is just a land acknowledgement from an Indigenous perspective and everything that, and recognize a lot of tribes from the area that we work in. I want to share with you, as our ancestors have taught us, we are only borrowing the land from our grandchildren. I also want to share that as Indigenous people, we consider ourselves part of the land. We are of the land. We are of everything that moves on this continent. And we have a term we call Wamashkashka Oyate. Everything that moves, we're a part of that. The air, the trees, the grass, Mother Earth, Unchimaka. And we also have a term that we say, Midaki Oyasi. It means that all my relatives, we consider the plants our relatives, the four-legged our relatives, the winged our relatives, the trees our relatives. We have a root nation, so we consider ourselves part of the circle. And I believe all Indigenous people have that concept. At this time, I want to just take time to acknowledge and recognize all our ancestors, their connections and their guidance and preservation of Unchimaka, our Mother Earth, and all those that have gone on and forward and continue to share their knowledge with us. At this time, I'm going to take just a couple seconds or a couple minutes to do a roll call of the people that inhabited this continent that we call Turtle Island. Chippewayan, Beaver, Cree, Stony, Sarsis, Blackfeet, Assiniboine, Ojibwe, Nobos, Flathead, Salish Kootenai, Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara, Chippewa, Crow, Northern Cheyenne, Oceti Shakowi, Lakota Teton, Two Kettles, Blackfeet, Oglala, Sichungu, Hunkpapa, Minikanju, Itazi Pachola, Yankton, Dakota, Sisseton, Wahpeton, Nakota, Ponca, Omaha, Winnebago, Fox, Iowa, Kickapoo, Pawnee, Oto, Arapaho, Missouri, Ute, Southern Cheyenne, Kansas, Osage, Jicarilla Apache, Kiowa, Navajo, Pueblo, Wichita, Quapaw, Jicarilla Apache, Caddo, Comanche, Huma, Chitimaca, Tonkawa, Karankawa. These are all of the tribes that I was able to find and recognize as being part of this landscape that we're working in and that we're considering part of the area and in the conversations we'll have in the next day. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and acknowledge those that walked on Unchi Maka in the past, those that continue to, and those that are resting here in Unchi Maka. Now the indigenous population, when we consider it, is less than 2% of the entire population. In the Great Plains, tribal land is approximately 10 million acres, very small amount of land amongst the tribes. I'll leave it with that, and I'll leave you to ponder the questions, how and why this has happened. I wanted to conclude with Unchi Maka, Grandmother Earth is sacred to the indigenous people. Everything we have walked here, our ancestors lie here throughout. Our beginnings are here. All our relatives are here, and our future generations are here. So in acknowledging the land, and as we prepare to create a roadmap, I ask that we walk gently upon Unchi Maka, that we be a good relative to all those that are the plants, the animals, the trees, the air, and that anything we do, we plan with a good heart, and we're mindful of the disruption that we create. I also ask that in all of this that we give back and we conserve for the next 7 generations, that in our planning we consider the next 7 generations. At this time, I want to say I acknowledge those who are of this space, the indigenous, and I just want to say thank you for allowing me to acknowledge, to do a land acknowledgement of all those that have been here, and to share with you all of the tribes that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. We really, really appreciate it. Great way to open. I'd like to acknowledge that where I'm broadcasting from in Colorado specifically, I'm on the region that is and was home to the Ute tribe. And as we move into our myriad of speakers for today's session, we have quite a few. I also want to take a moment to frame how all of today's speakers fit into the creation of the roadmap for the Central Grasslands. We've designed this speaker series, which includes today and speakers next Thursday and the following Thursday on the 16th and the 23rd, to complement the expertise and the knowledge base that all of the delegates who are listening in or who are on the panel today are bringing to the summit. And we want to hear firsthand about the experiences of those living and working on the Central Grasslands, about the science that is informing the challenges we're facing, and about the many, many incredible initiatives and solutions that are already happening on the grasslands. This ideally will help all of us gain a better understanding about what to prioritize in the roadmap as we move into those work groups on July 28th and August 5th. But without further musings from me, I want to introduce the founder and motivator for this entire project, Tammy from the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. Tammy, it's been more than inspiring to work with you on the summit, and I really want to thank you for bringing us all together and the opportunity to hear from you about where we're at and what we're up to and why we're here. Thank you. You are on mute. Still on mute, sorry.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And if anyone that knows me personally knows I'm technically challenged, so I thought that was the right way to start my presentation. I did want to thank Monica, Matt, and Alejandro for setting the stage and the spirit that we're here together for. So it's been quite a journey, a little emotional because it's been a long process to get here. So thank you, everyone. And as we kick this off, I really want to provide context. There's a lot of initiatives going on out there for grasslands, anywhere from the North American Bird Conservation Initiative to the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, to Partners in Flight, to the 3 Billion Birds Science Paper, to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, joint ventures, and just many of you on the call today and beyond. And this summit is really meant to complement these initiatives and get us working better together to save our grasslands. So we appreciate that you've all been on a journey and you're adapting as our world has changed. And we just look forward to charting the course forward as a collaborative, diverse community to conserve the people, places, water, wildlife, and heritage of our grassland landscapes. And I just really want to set the tone that we need to, these next few weeks, listen, share, be open to thinking differently about how we work, how we think, how we act. Let's be respectful. As they say, be a good owl, be a good listener. And obviously there's several partners and support that has made this journey possible. The presenting sponsors of the Knobloch Family Foundation and ConocoPhillips for their leadership investment that really helped put the meat on the bones, as well as several strategic conversations with so many partners. And just to name a few, including the Fish and Wildlife Service Region 6 office, Canadian Wildlife Service, Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture, Audubon Rockies, and so many others. And we've been very fortunate to get a lot of investment and support at the different levels, from platinum to gold to silver and scholarship. And this includes a wonderful mix of states, industry, foundations, and non-governmental organizations. And we have several partners that are also supporting, from the Fish and Wildlife Service to the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and Canadian Wildlife Service. And we have additional supporters that will be coming on, as we are very optimistic that we can all come together in person as a community next year. And obviously this was a team effort. That's the point. It takes a team to get us where we need to go. So we really wanted to be inclusive and diverse. We have 26 planning partners that have worked over the last year to help pull the summit together, representing 8 sectors, including non-government organizations, state, federal, academia, indigenous, industry, foundations, and private landowners. And also this represents 3 countries, the Canada, US, and Mexico. So thank you. Also, we should really do a call out to Matt. He's been an amazing facilitator, very flexible, very adaptable, and very resilient as we've moved forward. So thank you, Matt, with Rocky Mountain Innovation Lab. So why are we here? What are we up to? As you're aware, grassland conservation is complicated. And if you think about from the soils to the water, to the wildlife, and to the human communities. And there's a lot of wonderful initiatives, organizations, and partners working on grassland conservation. But the reality is, in many cases, our efforts are going in different directions. Sometimes it's creating more noise. Our efforts are not adding up to make the cumulative impacts we need to do to change the direction that we're heading in our grasslands. And we're seeing some duplication and some overlapping efforts. So ultimately, what we really want to do is come together, get on the same page, and be more effective and efficient for our grasslands and our communities. And this is the World Wildlife Fund plow print map. And if you look at this, the bright green are our grasslands, the darker brown are the cultivated land, and then you see splatterings of yellow. Those are our urban and rural centers. And recognize that this landscape pattern is duplicative in Canada and Mexico. So just wanted to provide that sense of place and what the landscape looks like out there. And it is a working landscape, and it is very dynamic, ever changing. And it's a landscape that's producing grass for cattle production, crops for food and human consumption, energy, and it also supports human and wildlife communities. So as we think over these next several weeks, ultimately, how do we keep grass side up? How do we minimize conversion in a landscape that is predominantly privately owned and also honoring property rights? How do we grow crops with less inputs that support more biodiversity? How do we address depleted aquifers? We're also running out of water for agriculture, for wildlife, and for our human communities. And how do we ensure resiliency in a changing climate? We have policies that promote conservation in one area and conversion in others. So how do we address these conflicting pieces? And how do we support diverse communities and cultures? At the end of the day, it's a human-centered approach, and humans are going to lead the way to solutions. So there's many markers out there indicating that what we're doing is not sustainable. We're exceeding the capacity of the land. From not only the land to the birds, to other wildlife, to aquifers, the system is stressed. And the indicators are clear. Many of you have heard of the state of the birds and the 3 billion birds lost. 1 in 4 of those 3 billion birds lost in the last 50 years are grassland birds. 750 million, and they call this area home. We're on average annually losing 2 million acres of grassland habitat. So many things are in decline, from our birds to our grassland acres, to our mammals, to our pollinators, to our native plants. And also our rural communities and our indigenous communities are suffering and having sustainability challenges. So the challenges are diverse. The reality is no one entity or organization can save our grasslands. It requires a collaborative movement. So how do we flock together better? And as we think over these next few weeks and work, what new approaches, innovative ideas are needed in science, policy, and partnerships? What's working that we need to do more of and have it scale up? And how do we make sure it's relevant at the community and local level? What isn't working and what should we just stop doing? How do we get a commitment across the sectors and countries to change the trajectory? And how do we move the roadmap into action once we develop it? And as you think about success, what success looks like by us flocking together is we have healthy wildlife, we save our water, aquifers, our grasslands, we soften the footprint like Monica was talking about, become more resilient for the changing landscape and climate ahead, and we ultimately save our natural and our cultural heritage. So as you dive in with us, think, work together, be open, be respectful, embrace change, and focus on solutions. And ultimately, we need to check our egos and our logos at the door. Let's get on the same page, headed in the same direction together. So let's set that course, a heading that gets us all oriented in the same direction, that same highway, with our efforts, instead of running over each other, merging together. Let's set the stage, get the steps, actions, and those measurable milestones out there, and let's hold ourselves accountable to setting the course and committing to it for at least the next 10 years. We have to commit through the work we do, for what we fund and invest in, to make it an achievable plan, and we all have to be ambassadors for it. So we're part of the landscape, critical part of the solution to saving the people, places, and natural resources we love. So thank you. I'm excited for the journey ahead, and I'll turn it over to Arvind.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Really, really appreciate it. As I said, it's been really inspiring to work with you on this. And yeah, thank you. Arvind, if you're up, let me know if I can help.
Sure. Let's see. I just need to share my screen here. And I think we should be good to go. You all seeing my screen now?
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Tammy, for helping to set the context for this summit. I really appreciate your passion and energy and all the hard work you put into organizing this. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Arvind Punjabi, and I'm an avian conservation scientist here at Bird Conservancy of the Rockies, where I've spent much of the last 15 years trying to better understand what's driving the decline of our grassland birds and taking steps to conserve them, especially in the Chihuahuan Desert of Mexico. I'd like to start off by addressing why birds matter and why we should all be concerned about the loss of birds from our grasslands and elsewhere. Birds being among the most abundant, visible, and ecologically diverse and sensitive group of vertebrates on the planet, they are quite literally, if I can get my advanced work, they are quite literally the canaries in the coal mine. And they rapidly reflect changes to our environment through changes in their own abundance. And thus, they really are an early warning system, just like the canary that the miners would bring down into the mines, signaling danger in the broader ecosystem that is likely affecting other species as well, including humans. So, as go the grassland birds, so go the pronghorn, the bison, the swift fox, the grouse, the cattle, and eventually the people. So that's why it's so important that we address the decline of birds in our grasslands to better understand its causes and the potential solutions for the benefit of not just the birds, but all life.
Hey, Arvin, we are sorry to interrupt. We're getting a little, you're in presenter mode, so we can see all of your notes too, and not able to see the screen as much. I know we ran through this and
Oh boy,
figured it up here anyway.
how do I fix it? New share? Let's see. I did click the wrong screen. Thank you for letting me know.
Yep. Sorry to interrupt. There we go.
Okay. Now you can see all my secrets.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, thanks very much. So we'll start off a little bit overview of the Central Grasslands, a shared ecosystem that spans from Canada to Mexico, with many shared plants and animals, including resident and migratory birds, as well as species like pronghorn, bison, and prairie dogs, among many others that are found nowhere else in the world. So this map on the left here shows the overlap and distribution of grassland bird species that breed primarily in the Great Plains, highlighting the strong migratory connectivity of these birds with the Chihuahuan Desert region. In fact, over 85% of grassland-dependent bird species in this region migrate between the Great Plains and Chihuahuan Desert twice a year, spending as much as 8 to 9 months on their wintering grounds and places in between. The other 15% are either local resident bird species and a part of the Central Grasslands, or they migrate to the pampas grasslands of the southern cone of South America. And this is just a small number of species, but the vast majority stay almost entirely within this trinational Central Grasslands ecosystem. So you might notice that the extent of grasslands in the Chihuahuan Desert region is significantly less than in the Great Plains, and this is in fact correct. The estimated extent of grasslands in the Chihuahuan Desert is about 1/5 that of the Great Plains. So that means that migratory grassland birds coming from the Great Plains have to concentrate in a much smaller area and in much higher densities than they do in the Great Plains. And this has in fact also been corroborated by our surveys in the Chihuahuan Desert that often find areas of grasslands with more than 100 birds per hectare, or 40 grassland birds per acre, which is quite a high density. As many of you probably know, the grasslands are a product of our physical and biological environment, having been shaped through forces of nature over millions of years through the effects of climate as well as fire, which is now mostly limited to prescribed fire, although not entirely. It's also been shaped by the animals that live here, especially the grazers, which historically were bison and other large herbivores, but today have largely been replaced by cattle. Smaller herbivores, such as the prairie dog, are also noteworthy as their role as keystone species, creating unique conditions that are preferred by birds like mountain plovers, burrowing owls, McCown's longspurs, as well as other animals. Grazers literally are the ecosystem engineers in the grasslands that create the vegetation composition and structure that birds and other wildlife depend on. Here you can see how these bison are literally creating the spaces between the grass that the birds need to move about and find food in the grasslands. This graphic from Knopf and colleagues illustrates how different grassland birds require different vegetation structure that's influenced by grazers, such as bison and cattle. And you can see that the highest diversity of birds is found in this area here in the middle, with relatively heavy to moderate grazing. And without grazing, many grassland birds simply would not exist in the grassland. However, as we know, the Great Plains grasslands have been greatly reduced, fragmented, and degraded over time, starting as far back as the 1800s, through the conversion of grasslands to farmlands, as well as overgrazing that's led to the loss of grass cover, shrub encroachment, and the desertification of grasslands, rendering them nearly useless for both wildlife, cattle, and people. These effects have continued to grow over time and have been exacerbated by other changes, including installation of extensive power lines, pipelines, widespread energy development in remote areas, all of which create significant surface disruption, leading to the spread of invasive species like cheatgrass that can negatively affect birds and other animals living in these areas. Of all these, the conversion to cropland, as well as shrub encroachment, are likely two of the most important contributors to grassland bird loss. In fact, here are the numbers. Thanks to a recent analysis by Comer et al., you can see that cumulatively, we've lost 98% of the tall grass prairie, 76% of the mixed grass prairie, and nearly half of the shortgrass prairie. And as Tammy mentioned, and according to the latest Plowprint report by World Wildlife Fund, we've lost 1.7 million acres of grassland in the US and Canada just in 2017, which is a slight drop from previous years, but hardly an encouraging number. In the Chihuahuan Desert in northern Mexico, the extent of grassland loss is completely unknown. The only estimates of loss available are from a recent study by Poole et al. For the Valle Centralis region of Chihuahua, where they discovered that 175,000 acres of new croplands were created over 5 years, largely at the expense of native grasslands. Through our monitoring efforts in this region, we've demonstrated that the Valle Centralis region supports a significant proportion of the global population of birds like chestnut-collared longspurs, Sprague's pipits, and several other of our most steeply declining grassland birds. So what's been the impact of all this change over the decades? Well, in 2019, I was part of a group of scientists that published an analysis in Science documenting the net change in breeding bird abundance in the US and Canada since 1970. The findings were staggering, indicating that we had lost nearly 3 billion birds from our environment across all biomes, equaling nearly a total third decline in total bird abundance just within our lifetimes. And fully 50% of the 529 bird species that we analyzed showed significant population declines. Grassland birds have been particularly hard hit relative to birds in other biomes, showing a total 53% loss of abundance, equaling 720 million birds lost. So roughly out of those 3 billion birds that we've lost continent-wide, 1 out of every 4 of those was a grassland bird. And fully 75% of grassland bird species are showing significant population declines. On the bright side, wetlands are showing modest gains of about 20 million birds, a testament to what we can do when we pass legislation and to protect our environment and invest in conservation programs. Unfortunately, the news is even worse for grassland birds that overwinter in the Chihuahuan Desert, as they've declined at twice the rate of other grassland birds, having lost roughly 70% of their population since 1970, compared to roughly 35% for other grassland birds. And the numbers of birds lost are staggering, from 16 million chestnut-collared longspurs to 182 million horned larks. We have a long way to go to try to recover these populations. In addition to the shrub encroachment, another major reason for the loss of grassland birds that's been well documented since at least the 1860s is the increasing encroachment of woody shrubs into the central grasslands, especially in the Chihuahuan Desert and southern Great Plains. However, the extent to which that occurred, both historically and recently, has not been well documented due to the lack of historical data and the difficulty in discerning shrubs in remote sensed imagery. However, it's clear from our survey work in the region that the vast majority of grasslands in the Chihuahuan Desert have experienced considerable encroachment of woody shrubs like mesquite and juniper, among others, and that this is largely the result of management or the lack thereof. In addition, recent research by Bird Conservancy and others suggests that woody shrub encroachment into grasslands reduces overwinter survival of birds in these areas. Now, why is this? Well, as shrubs get established in the grasslands and reach a certain height, they begin to attract predatory birds, like shrikes, that are not otherwise found in open grasslands. Thus, the shrub encroachment at a large scale can tip the balance between predator and prey in these environments, leading to lower overwinter survival in the Chihuahuan Desert. Thus, because of the scale at which shrub encroachment is occurring in the desert grasslands, it could be a major contributing factor to limiting grassland bird populations. So, can we bring them back? And how? Well, we shouldn't stop what we're doing. We should continue to and expand conservation efforts focused on known or suspected causes of decline, especially those with strong scientific evidence. But it shouldn't necessarily be business as usual. We need to be more strategic, more targeted in our efforts to the highest priority species and needs. We need to incorporate monitoring and evaluation to document our outcomes and inform the next steps. And we need to repeat and expand to scale up. We also need to focus on restoration. And we know we cannot return most of the lost grasslands that have been converted to farmlands back into grasslands, but where we can, we need to take those opportunities. And one program I want to highlight is the Conservation Reserve Program. We've recently been doing some analyses of data that have shown that CRP, as it's known, is very effective at recovering a large proportion of the grassland biodiversity in highly fragmented landscapes. Now, another action that we can take is to reverse shrub encroachment. Given the massive extent of this in the Chihuahuan Desert, we need to begin to address this more than a century of gradual change that's continuing today. And it is possible to do. As you can see from some of our work in Chihuahua, it's possible to turn a shrub-infested grassland like this one through mechanical shrub removal into a more natural grassland that can accommodate and help the survival of several of our most steeply declining grassland birds. Finally, I also want to emphasize the need to identify the leading causes of population decline for each species of birds, the smoking guns, if you will. These are not necessarily going to be the same for each species. But what we need to do is identify where in the life cycle can we best achieve population growth? Where are we losing birds? And the one way to do this is through integrated population models and that combine demographic information as well as information on abundance and external factors such as habitat loss and management effects that can help us identify limiting factors and ways to alleviate them. This is exactly what the Partners in Flight, Bring Back 3 Billion Birds, and Road to Recovery initiatives are aiming to do, and they've identified 4 central grassland species as among those with the greatest urgency for conservation. This is based on an analysis of expected half-life of these birds. That's to say that how long will it be before we lose another 50% of the current populations of these birds. And for some species like Sprague's pipits, it could be as little as 12 years before we lose another 50% of this population. For birds like chestnut-collared longspur, it's only 20 years. And mountain plover, 27 years. Barred sparrow, 38 years. These are relatively short time frames within which we need to make a difference for these birds and turn their trajectory around. And that's what this Grassland Summit is all about, increasing our collaboration, our synergy, scaling up our efforts, and increasing our strategic investment in both science and conservation. So before I go, I just want to leave you with that last thought of that birds really are the indicators of the environment, and bird population declines are signaling major problems, especially in grasslands and farmlands. And a healthy home for birds really is a healthy home for all of us. It's up to us to be a voice for change and wish you all the greatest success and encouragement in making a difference for grasslands as we come together here to create the Central Grasslands Roadmap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arvin. We really, really appreciate it. Great context setting there. And Amanda, we'd love to hand it over to you. And I think you have screen sharing capabilities now for your PowerPoint. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. All right. Let me know when you see presentation. Is that good? Is it presenter mode?
Yeah, we've got it. Oh, looks good here.
Okay, I'm good. Great, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Amanda Haverland. I work for ABC and Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture. And I'm going to be talking about an international assessment of state level grassland conservation programs, also referred to as the Grassland Conservation Gap Analysis. So a little bit of background info. In 2016, the Grassland Work Group was formed by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Bird Conservation Committee. And this work group came up with the idea to conduct a state-by-state gap analysis in order to map tri-national grassland habitat programs and bird conservation efforts across North America. So the goal of this gap analysis is to develop a snapshot of current programs that are collectively addressing grassland management and restoration, as well as declines in the broad suite of grassland species. So our work will hopefully help to determine where collaboration efforts and funding are needed. So to get things started, the work group put together a 10-question survey that is geared towards collecting specific information about grassland program types, conservation targets, funding sources, partners, and then a few other things. This survey is web-based and it has already been sent out via an email link to many would-be participants. And the instructions that we sent along with the link explain that the main interest in terms of programs are targeted state, national, federal, or NGO programs that address grassland habitats, primarily on private lands, but efforts that address monarchs, pollinators, birds, and other grassland associated species are also of interest. And then at the end of the survey, there is a request for the participants to click a link that takes them to this online interactive map you see a screenshot of right here. And we ask that they draw polygons around program locations or focal areas. And I'll get back to this map in just a little bit. So to get started with this project, I had to find the right people to reach out to. And I was basically starting from scratch. We wanted to target folks from state fish and wildlife agencies, as well as farm bill coordinators and folks at federal agencies and NGOs. So I ended up doing just a ton of Googling. And somewhat of a side note, I found that most of the state wildlife agencies in the Central Flyway had web pages dedicated to landowner programs. However, finding these pages wasn't always easy, especially by way of the navigation menus on each site. So finding a contact person was even more challenging because they weren't always listed. So I think the take home here is that state agencies may want to check to make sure these pages are easy to find. However, I understand it's likely that the information challenges that I observed on these websites are out of the control of managers to change due to website policies and procedures. So over the course of a couple of months, I sent out 240 emails to over 90 entities and inviting them to take this survey and to contribute spatial data. And so all 10 state agencies in the Central Flyway have responded, as well as 2 Canadian provinces. And there was a good response from the Mississippi Flyway as well. And response rates from the Atlantic and Pacific Flyways are a bit low, but I will eventually follow up and nudge those folks in those regions to fill in the blanks. And we haven't sent this survey to the contacts in Mexico yet, but that is currently in the works. So here are just some of the current results from specific questions. And this is just for the Central Flyway. So the majority of grassland conservation programs are federal, followed by state/provincial, and then federal and state partnerships tied for third place with NGO programs. And for over 50% of the programs in the Central Flyway, birds are listed as the main conservation target. And then habitat was the second highest proportion, followed by roughly equal proportions among the other categories. And so I think the take home here is that the majority of the grassland conservation programs are probably better classified as wildlife programs. And about a quarter of the programs do not have any monitoring associated with their conservation practices, or it could have been that the survey participant didn't know if there was, but the majority of programs do have some sort of habitat or wildlife monitoring in place. And some monitoring is likely actually compliance, which is a little bit different animal that we may want to explore at a later date. So top funding sources are split about equally between state/province and Farm Bill funding. And then in third place, which is other, which represents things that were only listed once, some examples being landowner groups, endowment income, lease revenue, or just one specific partner. And as I mentioned earlier, the other part of the gap analysis was this interactive online map to which we asked the participants to contribute data. And so far, 202 programs or projects have been entered into the map. 63 of those are in the Central Flyway, which you can see delineated here. And there are quite a few more in the Mississippi Flyway. However, there are 4 more states there in that region, meaning more opportunities for state programs. And plus 2 of the states there ended up entering a number of grassland conservation areas that really upped the numbers. So let's take a closer look at this online map. I'm going to navigate that real quick. All right, so here is the website that's dedicated just to this project, and I'm gonna click the map tab. And it loads. Okay, so it's pretty simple. So a participant that wanted to draw some data on here could just zoom into their region. You can actually toggle layers on and off. So I'm going to turn off this flyway for a second and then turn on counties. So all they would do is click this edit button and then select
Amanda,
the target.
we can't see your navigation.
Oh, what can you see?
Still see your slide.
Oh, really? Maybe I have to exit my PowerPoint.
Yeah, I believe so. I think you have to reshare, get into that, and then reshare your screen.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me new share. Now do you see it?
Yes.
Hooray. Okay. Where was it? Okay, so let me start over. So here's the map that is on this website that's dedicated to this project. And there's different layers you can toggle on. So here you can see the flyways. So I'm just kind of focusing on Central right now. And I'm going to turn that off again and zoom back in. I can turn on the counties there. And so if I was going to enter data, I'd click this edit button. Let's say songbirds are the target for the program. And basically all participants have to do is click to draw a polygon. And then you can enter simple information about the project. Oops. Yeah, so I'm going to delete that. So as you can see, the Central Flyway, sorry, it takes a second to load, is pretty well filled in. Let me turn the, however, different states and provinces entered their data on different scales. And really, this is just the beginning, and we want to build off of this and see where we can take it and see maybe we can link some of the programs and improve upon what we've got going here. So really, I would like anybody who is listening to this that thinks that they can contribute data or would like to look closely at this map and see if something's missing for their state or region to please get in contact with me, and I will send you the link to this map, or hopefully we can actually put it on the website and my email as well. Let's see if I can pull up my presentation again so you can get my email address really quick.
Yeah, and this will be posted on the resource page on the website. A lot of the delegates have been headed over there to look at a number of the other resources, but this will all be on there, as well as your speaker piece and contact information, so people can get in touch with you there. So.
Awesome. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
And yeah, as I was saying, that will be on the resource page of the website if you have not gone over there yet. And if Amanda, if you click off of your shared screen, we can bring Jim up to give us a nice overview of scale and how we're approaching this roadmap at scale. Thank you both.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Amanda. See if I can, okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about scale and what it represents with this idea of a roadmap. And I thought I would start off with the first conservation roadmap that was made by Aldo Leopold. The report on the game survey for the North Central states in 1931. And this is a literal roadmap that he created showing his route when he went out to survey for wildlife. So we're building off the idea of this kind of roadmap. And that's the trail that he traveled in 1931. Imagine the cars he was using. Oh, and I just want to mention, my name is Jim Giacomo. I'm the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture Coordinator for American Bird Conservancy, located here in Round Rock, Texas. So back to talking about scale and the Central Grasslands Roadmap. When I talk about scale, working in a joint venture that is located in central Texas and Oklahoma, I'm thinking about 60 million acres at a time and trying to take continental plans down to regional levels and then do local actions. So you can talk about scale from continent and country to ecoregion, province and state and county level, down to individual farms and ranches, and then fields within those ranches, and then even down to individual nest sites for wildlife species that could be a couple inches or a couple of centimeters where they pick a site. So all of those scales are important, but we think for this roadmap, we kind of want to stay in the middle of those scales in the ecoregion, the state to county level, and then bring it, take those pieces and bring it down to the local level. So when we're thinking, we want to think kind of middle of the road of this region, and I'll talk a little bit more about the region. And the amount of space that we talk about, the amount of land area we talk about also influences the amount of time that it will take for certain practices to evolve. So we got to be patient when we start thinking bigger. And so we're talking about central grasslands, and central grasslands basically are the grasslands that are in the administrative central flyway that we've been talking about a little bit in the previous talks. And then grasslands, as Arvind showed, there's lots of different kinds of grasslands. Grassland could mean grassy areas, could mean prairies, short and mixed and tall grass prairies, could mean savannas, grassy areas with trees, or shrub grasslands or desert grasslands. In our survey that Amanda just talked about, we did not define what grassland meant. We let each state define, or each state and province define what grasslands mean, because depending on where you're standing, your grasslands may look very different. So we got to keep that in mind from north to south and east to west. Different grasslands mean different things to different people, and we're not all wrong. So the Central Grasslands includes basically 3 provinces in Canada, 10 states in the United States, and then at least 8 states in Mexico, or pieces of all of those states. So north to south, it's about 3,500 kilometers, or a little over 2,000 miles, and it would take you 35 hours to drive north to south or south to north. East to west, it's about 550 miles across. So it's a huge area. And it includes the Great Plains that we've talked about a little bit, and the Chihuahuan Desert, and probably a bunch of other areas. So we're talking about 1.3 million square kilometers, plus another almost 400,000 square kilometers, a total area of 1.7 million kilometers. And just the Great Plains alone, the map that you see there is 50 different published maps of the Great Plains on top of one another. So the boundaries are kind of fuzzy. The area is kind of hard to define, but generally what we're talking about is for the Great Plains, this area here, and then for the Central Grasslands, same concept. It's pretty fuzzy. So add in the Chihuahuan Desert, and you're looking at that 1.7 million kilometers, or 420 million acres. So it's about 1,000 times the largest city in North America, Mexico City. Or because I'm in Texas, we measure everything in Texas's. It's about 5.5 times the size of Texas. But of course, Canada's much larger, so it's 2 times Saskatchewan. And we're not just talking about a lot of people in this area. We're also, there's a lot of cattle, and almost works out that in the United States and Canada, the portions, it's about 1-to-1 for cattle to people in these states, in provinces in this region. So a lot of people, a lot of cattle, about 50 million people. Add in the Mexico portion, and you're talking about another 27 million people. And I couldn't find state by state numbers for cattle, but there's about 16 million. So almost a 2 people to 1 cattle ratio for that area. But again, a lot of people, a lot of cattle, and a lot of, as mentioned earlier in the talks, in the very beginning, a lot of tribal and indigenous nations represented in the region. So we're talking very big areas, very different things happening. 8 joint ventures, bird habitat joint ventures, encompass this area, and are working together as partnerships to move forward some of this grassland effort. So unprecedented partnerships of 8 joint venture working together. And then a lot of this area, as Arvin was talking about, is defined by the birds. You can see in this lark bunting does probably the best job of representing the geography that we're talking about for this Central Grasslands. You can see as it moves from its wintering areas to its breeding areas, there's about 12 million lark buntings globally, and almost all of them are in this Central Grasslands area. And they're not the only species like that. As Arvin mentioned, there's a lot of species that 100% of their population basically is in this Great Plains area, including the 5 species listed on the top there: the Cowan's longspurred, sprague pipit, Baird sparrow, chestnut-colored longspurred lark bunting. There's also species that are North America wide, but 2/3 of their population are within our Central Grasslands area, like grasshopper sparrow and loggerhead shrike. And then there's resident birds, where 100% of their life is spent, they don't migrate, so they're in the areas where they breed the whole year round, and 100% of their populations, or a huge portion of their populations, are within this Great Plains area. Just the idea of this talk was to kind of give an idea of how big of an area we're talking about and how much we can talk about it. So we chose the word roadmap specifically because it's a plan that doesn't have a lot of the on the ground details, and we shouldn't expect that right away. But we can see major landmarks, and we can see connections. And if we zoom in a little bit on that route right there, we can identify areas where things are working well, and identify areas where things need a little work, like these construction sites on this highway. And hopefully that's what we're going to get to in this roadmap is having an idea of connections, an idea of collaborations, an idea of where the major pieces are, and then can take those to smaller scales and start working together at the state and local level to implement some of the big ideas. So the idea is we're thinking globally and acting locally, but the plan for our roadmap is somewhere in the middle of that globally and locally act. That's all I have for that.
Great, Jim, thank you so much. I know for me, coming into this project, that our conversations around scale and how this roadmap works have been instrumental in understanding what we're doing and kind of some of the boundaries on it. So I really appreciate your time today and talk and your guidance with this, and encourage all the delegates to keep that concept of scale in mind and that roadmap image as we move into the working sessions later this month. So thank you again. I want to hand it over to Tammy to do introduction of our keynote speaker. We're shifting gears a little bit from our opening introduction, explanation of where we're at and what we're up to, and getting a chance to hear from some folks working out there and doing some exciting pieces. So Tammy, hand it over to you.
Just real quick, thank you everyone for all your great presentations and contributions. Excited to get the groundwork going. And now it's my honor to introduce USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service Chief Matt Lohr. He's here today to kick off the summit with a keynote address. And I know several of us have been fortunate to work with NRCS. They're a leader in conservation out there, and just look forward to hearing from the chief. He's a 5th generation Virginia farmer, long established history of environmental stewardship, grew up farming in Virginia, and also has served as a state ag commissioner, also a motivational speaker. So his expertise is broad, and we really appreciate his leadership and commitment to conservation. And he's been serving as the chief of the NRCS since December of 2019. So Chief Lohr, welcome.
All right, thank you, Tammy. Can you hear me okay? I'll try to share my screen here with you guys. Let's see, display settings, resume view. All right, can you all see that?
Yep, it's coming up. You're in that fun speaker mode where we can see your notes and your.
Okay,
your
so we gotta get this screen over here, Eric. Hold on one second here. They're seeing this side instead of this side. Okay, let me see how we can do. Let's try this. Is that better?
Still the same challenge.
Still the same. Okay.
Yeah. Can you use the one that you're in? Could you use that as your notes, and the other one? Yep, that works there. That does it.
Is that right now?
Yep, that does it.
All right, very good. Excellent, excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to be a part of this Central Grasslands Roadmap Summit. I'm really excited to be able to share with everyone today. I wish that we were in person. I'm a speaker. I love to be on stage and be interacting with the audience, so I still haven't quite figured out how to connect as well when you do it remotely, but nonetheless, we're fortunate to have some technologies like Zoom that we can still be able to have events like this. So thank you, Tammy and Matt, for all of your work and getting me here today and be able to share. I want to start off by congratulating all of the delegates for your involvement in such an important undertaking. As you know, the Central Flyway Zone, I mean, is such an important part of North America, 500 million acres. It's huge. Especially when you bring in Canada and Mexico and the United States in order to put this roadmap together. It's going to take such huge collaboration. And as the chief of NRCS in the last 2 years, I've been so impressed when we look in conservation of really how much collaboration plays such a vital role. One agency or one group just can't do it alone. And when we look at the delegates here making up of our state and federal agencies and our tribes and NGOs, our private landowners, that's very exciting to bring so many different folks to the table in order to work on such an important journey and mission that we're embarking on. So thank you for the chance to share today. Thanks for bringing NRCS into the equation, and how exciting to think that we have the opportunity to truly create the future when we think about the Central Grasslands area and the great work that takes place there. So I have the great fortune, as Tammy said, to serve as chief of the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. I'm not sure how many of you are really familiar with our agency. Been around for about 85 years. We were formed out of the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. And the goal that we have across our 3,000 offices and our 10,000 employees is working hand in hand with our farmers, our ranchers, our private forest landowners to provide the technical assistance and the financial assistance to address the resource concerns and help them be the best stewards of the land, help them improve their operations, and help them see the power of conservation and the benefits that it takes over an operation. Congress blesses us with about $4.5 billion each year in Farm Bill programs through EQIP or CSP or ACEP, which is our Conservation Easements Program, or RCPP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We have a lot of dollars that we leverage with our producers and our partners, and I know many of those partners are represented here on the call today, to really help address conservation resource needs all across the country. And of course, conservation is so important when we look at the success of American agriculture. You know, the North American grasslands are so crucial to our communities, to the environment, to agriculture, and we're very fortunate through our agency to have been very involved in the work in this area of programs like our Working Lands for Wildlife, where we work hand in hand with our private landowners to address not only conservation needs, but endangered species or listed species, and how producers can put a plan together where they can still farm and enhance their agricultural operation, but at the same time looking at special attention to habitat, whether it's lesser prairie chicken or sage grouse. I've learned that, you know, it used to be either you farm or you protect habitat, but we are now in a world where we can work together and integrate them hand in hand, and that's been so very important to be a part. So thank you so much for allowing me to be able to be on the agenda today, and thanks for letting NRCS be a part of this equation. Okay, so being able to create a roadmap is going to be so very important as we go forward. And as Tammy said, I'm very fortunate to be a 5th generation farmer from the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. On the slide, you'll see a picture of my farming operation began in the 1880s. This is my great-great-grandparents there in the carriage. Those 2 barns you see on each side of the slide are actually still in operation today. We retired the horse and carriage a couple of years ago, but I love this picture because for me it shows the history for our farming operation, but more importantly, it shows that how important a roadmap has been for the success of all 5 of our generations. Every generation before me has had a vision of where they wanted the operation to go. They've created that roadmap, but the thing is they've had to adapt it and they've had to change it over time. And we think about where we are today, you know, with the Central Grasslands, that's so important to continue to look at changing and where we are today, but where we want to go in the future. And I've learned very much that over these generations, these are some more pictures of our farm. Over the generations, we've adapted to the type of livestock that we've done, the type of poultry, the type of crops. Recently, we've placed conservation easements on our operation. And for me, when I think about why I believe in conservation, it's really not for my generation, but it's for the next generation. This is a picture of my 6 kids and my wife, and I'm not sure.
Chief Orr, sorry to interrupt. Wondering if, I think we're not getting the slide advance now as you're moving into those photos.
Okay.
If you're on 2 screens, you may need to be advancing both at the same time. Not totally sure on your end.
What can you see right now?
We're on the title slide.
You're still on the title slide. Okay, let me see. Is that better? Can you see it now?
No, we're just on you.
Okay, let me see here.
Sorry about that.
No, thank you. I appreciate you letting me know. I've got pictures I want to show you. So this does not happen when you're on stage in a live audience. So,
I'll tell you what, if you go off of your shared screen, I will bring it up on on mine and I can just advance them for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be great. Let me,
Okay.
so do I hit new share?
I'll just take over right now.
Okay, please do. Save me from myself, please.
And thanks to your patience and everybody out there for
Thank
catching
you
on as we
all
do
very
it.
much. All right, so let's go back one there, Matt, if you would. So this was the picture from the 1880s. My great-great-grandparents who started the farming operation, and they're the ones that had this initial roadmap of where they wanted our farming operation to go. But of course, it's changed many times over the years. If you advance it one. Some more pictures of our farming operation today. And then finally, the picture of my family with our 6 kids and my wife. We recently placed conservation easements on our farming operation to make sure that our land will be preserved forever. And I'm not sure if I've got a 6th generation farmer in the picture there, but I do know that each of my children have been around agriculture their whole life. They understand the importance of conservation and the power of conservation. And they know that there's been a roadmap that's been put in place for them moving forward. And that's why I think it's so very exciting that you all are taking the time at this event to really develop the roadmap of where you want to go. All right, thank you. So with NRCS, what makes us successful is we do conservation planning. We have a 9-step conservation planning process. And it usually starts with a producer that has some type of resource concern. And really, we work together to put a plan in place. And so what I wanted to do is kind of run through quickly the 9 steps of a conservation plan that we take and how really that parallels with the steps that you're taking to put a roadmap together, because planning is so very, very important. One of the activities I used to do when I did youth trainings is I would have like a 5-foot by 5-foot square that'd be mapped off with some tape, and I would have 30 round paper plates that would be all mixed together, all in different orders. And I would have a group of students come around and they would turn their back to the square. And I would say, when I say go, you're going to turn around and you want to hit the plates in order 1 through 30 as fast as you can, with only one person or one body part being in the middle of the square at a time. And you have to go in order. So I say go, they turn around and they're stumbling through trying to hit these plates. And usually it's like 2 minutes to get through the activity. And I stop and I give them 30 seconds to talk and plan and look at the situation, talk together, put a plan together. Then I let them go again. And usually it goes from like 2 minutes down to a minute. I give them another 30 seconds to plan. And then they usually figure out they got to get down on their knees. And then they start putting this great strategy together. And by the 3rd or 4th time, they've got their time down to like 15 or 20 seconds. And it really shows the importance of having a plan. Anytime you have a plan with whatever activity you're embarking on, the success is going to be there. The results are going to be there. It's going to be done quicker and more efficiently. And I think by you all coming together and putting this master plan together, it's going to be very, very important to see where we go in the future. Thank you, Matt. So very quickly, I'll kind of run through some of these to see, it starts with identifying a problem. Again, for a producer, it's normally a resource concern of erosion, or maybe there's too much water or not enough water, or maybe the water's polluted. For you, you have a huge area, a part of North America that you want to see protected. The Great Plains serves so many great purposes, but obviously it has threats. How can we work together to put a plan in place to maximize the grasslands, the habitat, the water? So very important to help identify what that problem is. Okay. Next is determining the objectives, and your draft vision statement that you all put together really digs into this and takes care of that. As you can see, talking about the flyway zone is abundant grasslands of native plants and communities and viable communities for birds and pollinators, just to name a few. And so I love where you're going with this and being able to how we dig in to know exactly how to make this happen. So inventory resources are very important, and I think the survey you took was able to do some of this to identify what the resources are, but also more importantly to help identify what some of the roadblocks are going to be and what some of the challenges are going to be. And I would just start off by saying that throughout this process that you're embarking on, there's going to be some roadblocks and some challenges as you go through this. And I want to share a quick activity with you to really kind of show that whatever you do, don't let these roadblocks slow you down or derail you, because you have to have determination when you work to put together such a massive plan as this. So I used to do a lot of workshops and speeches for high school students. And one of my favorite activities, I would have these letters of the alphabet, like from A to Z, and I would pass them out to a group of students, and I would give everybody one without them seeing it. And I would say, we're going to give you 5 minutes. When I say go, take the letter you're given, turn it over, and try to form as many words as you can with the letter that you've been given. So if one person has a C and they have an A and they have a T, they form the word cat. Every time your letter is used to form a word, you get a point, and everybody keeps track of their points. We bring everybody back together and we see who formed the most words with the letter they're given, and there's candy, and everybody's all excited, man. They're like, this is the greatest game. Let me have the letter. When I say go, they turn their letter over, and about half of the group jumps up and they start running around the room and they're holding up their letter. But the other half, they kind of pause and they look at their letter and they look at me and they start to complain, because they're like, you gave me a terrible letter. I can't do anything with this Q or this X or this Z. And they start to complain, and then somebody says it's not fair. Now, I've got 6 kids at home, and I'm sure many of you probably have children too. So you hear it's not fair a lot. And I always stop and say, well, you're right, it's not fair, because clearly some letters can form better words and more words than others. But life is kind of the same way. It's not fair because some people in life are given great hands, great letters, and some are born into tragedy and circumstance and handicaps. And so life is not fair. But the point of this is, what really determines your success is not the letter that you're given in life, but it's what you do with it. And so I was in Seattle, Washington, doing this event for a group of high school students, and we were going around after the activity was over, and a young lady was so excited she found 18 words. And when I asked her what her letter was, she held up the letter Q. And this is probably a little backwards on your screen, but the letter Q like this. And immediately people started complaining, there's no way in the world, there's not even 18 words in the dictionary that have a Q in it. How is that possible? And she said, well, I noticed that when I took the Q, I couldn't do much with it. But when I put my hand just like this, my thumb covered up that little piece in my Q, all of a sudden became the letter O. Another conference, somebody found 16 words with the letter X. Now, this is not really the letter you want, but they discovered they put their thumb right there and turned the X into the letter Y. And then somebody else found 14 words with the letter Z. Again, not the best letter to have, but when they turned it this way, it became the letter N. Although a little chubby, still the letter N. I love that activity because it really shows that, life is not the situation you're in. It's not the obstacle you have. It's not the letter you're given, but it's what you do with it. And when we work through this process to take on such a massive challenge, a massive task as this, there's going to be some roadblocks. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be different views and opinions, but you got to have determination, and you got to plow through, because that's the way that we're going to be able to come to some type of consensus and some type of success. So hopefully, as we go through this, there'll be plenty of that determination. All right, Matt. So these 3, I'm going to summarize very quickly. We've got to analyze our resource data, and the practical reality of grassland conservation of the Great Plains is that we need agriculture to sustain, enhance, and restore. So there's going to be, you got to analyze that resource data and formulate alternatives. How do we change the mindsets or the perceptions about conservation and agriculture, about something as fundamental as food production? That's so very important. But how do we change the mindsets of food production and conservation and habitat really can go hand in hand? Agriculture is not the enemy. Food production is not the enemy, but there has to be a way we can all work together. And finally, to be able to evaluate those various alternatives that you're going to put together is going to be very important. Okay. And then finally, we've got to make some decisions, and there's going to be some tough decisions with so many stakeholders. It really is going to come down to compromise, where everybody's got to learn to be able to give a little bit. I know about 20 years ago, when I was pretty young into my farming career, my wife and I were really getting on the agritourism bandwagon. We wanted to do you-pick pumpkins and corn mazes and bring thousands of people to the farm. It was a pretty traditional farming operation. My parents were very traditional. And when we approached this idea with them, we farmed together, they wanted none of it. They thought it was, especially I remember my dad saying, why would somebody pay money to walk through a cornfield? This was 20 years ago. And they really were opposed to any of us being able to look at some of these options. We wanted to provide our own roadmap for the future, but it was very different than the roadmap that they had put together. So it took some compromise. We wanted this huge, large operation. They wanted none of it. So we started with 1 acre of pumpkins and a small play area with hay rides, took it very, very small. And that first year, it was extremely successful. So the next year, we went to 3 acres of pumpkins, and we put a very small corn maze in, about 1 acre, and that was successful. By the 3rd year, my dad was asking us when we were going to really expand this operation and put in like a full-blown 10-acre corn maze. And I have to say that over the years, some years, we had 20,000 people that would come to our farm to bring their families and pick their pumpkins and spend the day learning. But it was a compromise in the beginning where we all had to come together to form our opinions, and we all gave a little bit, we all got a little bit, and then as we worked forward, we were able to make those tough decisions and then implement that plan going forward. So implementing the plan is so very, very important. You got to take action. So when this process is done and you have this roadmap together, sometimes you see these groups come together, they put these great plans together and they just put it on the shelf and they don't actually work to implement it. You got to be able to take action. We're not going to have results by just putting a plan together. We have to actually roll up our sleeves and implement. And then more importantly, we have to evaluate because times will change. We'll see things that work, things that don't work. That's a big part about NRCS as we are always involved in new types of conservation, reevaluating our practices because things evolve. You have to be able to continue evaluating where you go in order to be successful. So this is kind of, I love this picture because this kind of gives a summary of all of the things that you're all looking for in your roadmap. You know, the top right-hand corner, you see grassland. This is what our grassland should look like with our native plants. We see clean water and wildlife and pollinator habitats in the bottom right-hand corner. The bottom left, you know, food production. You know, we can have wildlife and pollinators, and that's very, very important, but we have to make sure that, you know, we have a world to feed. We have to make sure that agriculture production has got to be a part of the equation. And this kind of summarizes just a snapshot of how all of these different components that you've identified in your draft vision statement, how they can work together and how they can continue to bring all of these components together as we go forward down the road. The last thing I'll share with you, this is a big challenge, a big task ahead of us. Some of you and some people, when they hear what's taking place, are probably going to say, well, it's not possible. There's no way in the world you can bring this many stakeholders together. You can bring this many participants together to create this roadmap to satisfy such a wide-ranging audience. But you can if you can really envision the impossible. I'll wrap up with one of my favorite stories. It's about a man named Roger Bannister. Now, Roger Bannister was the first person in history to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Now, today that's quite common. It happens quite frequently. But in the 1870s, when they first started racing, it was thought to be impossible. There were thousands and thousands of runners all over the world were all trying to be the first person to run that mile in under 4 minutes. And for 75 years, it went unfulfilled until spring of 1954 in Oxford, England. A young man by the name of Roger Bannister became the first person in history to run a mile in under 4 minutes. It was such a big deal. His picture ended up on the front page of every newspaper around the world. I mean, this was something that doctors said that a human heart would explode in one's chest before someone could run a mile in under 4 minutes. It was so thought to be impossible. So it was such a big deal when it finally happened. When I was in college years ago, I did a research paper on Roger Bannister. I was fascinated in this process and the story. They went on to make a movie of him. He became a successful doctor. And I did some studies and I was interested that it took 75 years before the first person in the world could run a mile in under 4 minutes. And I was fascinated and curious to see how long it took before the second person could run a 4-minute mile. And I was amazed to learn that it only took 49 days before it happened again. In fact, throughout the rest of the year in 1954, there were 7 other runners that all ran a 4-minute mile in 1954 alone, and 3 of them even did it during the same single race. So what could have changed where it took 75 years before it happened the first time, and it just took 7 weeks before it happened the second time? Well, the only thing that changed was up here, right? For all those years, it was thought to be impossible. But when Roger Bannister did it for the first time and people could see that it could happen, nobody died, nobody's heart exploded, then they began to see it and then they began to believe it. And when they're mind began to believe it, their bodies began to respond accordingly. And today there have been over 3,000 runners around the world that have all run a 4-minute mile. What you're embarking on is very similar, because there will be some that say this is impossible. There's no way we can put this roadmap together. But I challenge you to be creative, think outside the box, look at ideas and programs and approaches that have never been thought of before. And instead of just chalking it up as being, well, there's no way that could happen, really dig in and ask the hard questions. Why not? Can we make this happen? Can we collaborate together? What are the resources? What are the tools? What do we need in order to make this roadmap a success? And if we can have that same vision and realize that if we're not limited, if we're not going to let the obstacles get in front of our way, we're diligent and working together on this plan, we understand the importance of compromise, we come up with a plan and we implement it and we reevaluate it, then I know that there's going to be some great things to occur in the next 10 years as we continue working together. So thank you for the chance to be a part of the team. Thanks for the chance to share with you today, and thanks for letting NRCS and everything we do at USDA to help you in creating this great undertaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Ward. Really, really appreciate your time today and jumping in and sharing those thoughts, and actually helping me cover a great deal of what I was going to cover at one point today. And you covered it so nicely in terms of what the steps are for a roadmap and your firsthand experience with that and getting to see it in a lot of different venues and places, including your personal story on your own family farm. So thank you very much for your talk and your time today.
Thank you.
We were going to have time originally for question and answer, and we are we're looking at the time window whittle away pretty quickly. And I know yesterday when we talked and did our tech run through, you had offered to maybe answer some questions offline after we finish up today. And I think we may move that direction if you're okay with that. Absolutely,
yeah. Feel free to send me the questions that are compiled, and we'll be glad to put some responses back and get those back to you. So.
Perfect. So attendees, delegates who are out there listening, a couple options. You can go ahead and put chat or Q&A questions to us now. You can also email the Grasslands email that people have been responding to invites and registration. It's also on the website. So any questions you have that we're not going to be able to take today, please get those in those different places, and we'll work with the chief and the other panelists as well to get those answered. That'll be a great resource for us to have on the website anyways, easy to respond to. So yeah, thank you again, Chief. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great rest of the afternoon. Appreciate it.
So what we'd like to move into now in our last bit of time is those additional firsthand experiences of being out there on the landscape and living and working on the Central Grasslands. And we've invited 4 speakers representing the different nations that are involved in this process to just share a little bit of their personal story and what's happening on their land and things that they're working on and projects, and to really try to thinking about Jim's scale, to really take this down all the way to the ranch level and that immediacy, so we can get a sense of what's out there. Tammy, do you want to add anything to that intro before I bring up the first? Okay. So Miles, if you're ready, what I'll have each person do as we go in order here is just introduce yourself and share your story and whatever thoughts and ideas you want to share. I know the different panelists have brought up some different resources or stories that they want to share. And so Miles, we'll go to you first, and if you're ready to go.
I guess I'm ready as I'm ever going to be. I don't have a whole bunch more to add. They pretty much covered everything I was going to talk about. But anyway, I'm at Fir Mountain, Saskatchewan in Canada, and we're kind of right in the geographical center of North America. Like, you can't get any more in the center than what we are. Like, we're about as far as you can get from anywhere, but we're close to everywhere, I guess. Anyway, like, our place consists of about 45,000 acres, and there's about a quarter of it's deeded, quarter of it's leased, and the other we lease or rent from Grasslands National Park through various agreements. And like, I guess I could start out with how I got involved with conservation. To start with, is I was the president of the Saskatchewan Stockbird Association. They were having a meeting in Regina that was going to talk about conservation and various things on the prairie, and I didn't really have time to go, so our secretary went, and she phoned me out the first day and said, "You better get in here because things aren't right." And so when I get there, what they decided was that there shouldn't be any cows at all grazing on the prairie, and the mixed grass prairie and the short grass prairie, and that they were a very horrible thing to have out there. And so anyway, I took pretty good offense to that, and kind of tore the meeting apart, actually. So, and they said they were going to prove me wrong because I didn't think we were doing that bad a job out here. And so anyway, the fellow that did the research, he come back saying that at the worst, it's a wash, that grazing would be a wash, if not better. And so anyway, with that, he said the only reason why we take cows off there is because we hate ranchers, and he didn't know enough of them to know if he hated us or not. So he gave us the benefit of the doubt. And with that, then I got involved with this Prairie Conservation Action Plan and starting redoing that. And we wrote it, and of course, the first goal was to ensure that there was a good native prairie grazing regime maintained in the province of Saskatchewan. And for the most part, it's been kind of holding its own, and we've come a long ways with World Wildlife Fund Canada saying that grazing is an acceptable use of mixed grass prairie, and that was a good thing. So anyway, time goes on, and we've got a bird that's on our place. We're just there right north of the Montana border, and called the greater sage grouse, and it's been struggling for quite some time. And so anyway, they come to me to see if we could make life better for the ones that were left. And so we had prescriptions on how much grass we could take grazing, and we do these transects to make sure that we were meeting the prescriptions that they required to create the best habitat we could for these birds. And it wasn't an onerous task to get there. So, I mean, we did that for, I think, 2 years with the first one. And then in 2015, I don't know, that might even been before, it was before but in 2015, there was an order put in place because the courts decided that the government of Canada wasn't doing their due diligence. They were taking to court on these greater sage grouse, and that they were going to they would be extinct if something wasn't done very fast. So anyway, the judge said that, yeah, it's not right, so they got to do something. So then they come and we did another agreement with Canadian Wildlife Service, or ECCC, and they give us some funding, and we hired some people, and we moved cows around, and we rented this land from the park that I talked about previous, and it was been ungrazed for anywhere from 15 to probably 30 years. So it was kind of overgrown grassland, hadn't been burnt, hadn't been grazed, and there was pretty much no forbs left growing there, or not little ones anyway, that sage grouse like to eat. So part of the deal was to manage this. And as we did that, the people that were working for me they had these either Android cell phones, or and they kept track of these other endangered species that they've seen while they were going around. And one of the comments they come back with is that there's got to be something wrong, because all we see are endangered species. And then when you look back at Harvard was saying about the birds that they've got in the Chihuahuan Desert, they're the same birds we have here, and they're in short supply, but they breed well under the management that we have, that we do here. So that's a good thing, I guess. And what else do we have? Like I said, you guys did a really good job saying a lot better. Oh, when folks are dealing with landowners, the thing you have to do is maybe you have to do like they did with me and upset me. So I was said that, okay, I don't think I'm as bad a guy as you think I am. And that I don't think we do as bad a job out there as you think we do. And I'm going to prove you wrong. Or after that happens, then like the carrot and the stick deal. Like, I mean, don't keep taking things away from us. Like our ability to manage our places and think that you're going to do us a favor and create friends. Maybe it's better to say, okay, this is what we're trying to get done. Is there something that you could do on your place to make it better for us? And this is what this particular bird or animal needs. How can you, with your management, make that better? And through the discussion, it's amazing what you'll come up with when you're dealing with farmers, because that's what we do is we grow things. And especially livestock people, because we do kind of understand animals. And yeah, that's one more. Oh, another thing that we talked about was the scale. And it's really important. Like when we get down to the thing, because I don't think we go small enough. And when we were talking about centimeters, I said, okay, we got a guy that knows what's going on here now, because we're talking, because I think it's insects and the food that these birds and various things eat that travel back and forth. And a lot of times the insects get left out because, oh, they're just there. I mean, they're mosquitoes, you swat them. I just killed some flies in the windows. I mean, that's the way it is, but the birds outside are running in the window trying to get them. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm good to be done.
That's great. Thank you, Miles. Appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Great firsthand story, and nice tips there at the end about how to work with landowners. And although I don't want to tick you off in this process, though, so but thank you, Alejandro. We're going down to the other side of the continent here, and I know that we just brought you up as a panelist. Are you ready to go? Or are you on? And I have your PowerPoint ready. If you are, we can also get Monica ready. We're just not seeing your video or your voice right now, Alejandro. Okay, Monica, are you, oh.
Yep, I'm ready.
There we go. Hey, Alejandro, thank you. Great.
Thank you, guys.
So same thing, I know you've got some pictures and stories you want to share, and I'll bring up your PowerPoint right now if you want to just jump right in and share your perspective about these.
Yep, can you see it?
Oh, are you trying to share? Sorry, let me share and see if it comes up, okay?
Okay, yeah, I was trying to share mine.
There, folks seeing it now? Yep, looks like it's up. Okay, so I'll go through, and if you want to just guide me a little bit when you're ready for the next piece, I can flip through it for you, and then we'll be sure to see all the great images and text you have. So take it away.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you everybody for the invitation. We are in Chihuahua, Mexico. We're ranchers there. I joined the ranching operation 15 years ago. Let's go to the next one. We are actually nested right in the middle of the Chihuahuan Desert in Chihuahua, Mexico. Next one, please. That's the ranch we own, 30,000 acres. As you can see, we have all kinds of terrain, hills and mountain range and flat grasslands. Next one, please. So a little bit of information about the ranch. Just keep going. We run just a cow-calf operation. We have very low precipitation. Our average is supposed to be 10 inches, but we have only 8 on the last 3 years. We don't use any kind of inputs. And in order for us to restore our place, we have not been using any chemical or mechanical or seeding. And what we do is actually doing holistic management or rational grazing, whatever you want to call it. And we are part of a network that encompasses more than 500,000 acres in the state of Chihuahua mostly. Next, please. So the rainfall actually mostly fall in 3 months, July, August, and September. So the idea here is for us to be an independent ranch, we have to stockpile the grasses for 9 months, to live on the grass for 9 months, and then to grow enough grass on those 3 months that we got the rains. Next one, please. So I took this picture about 2 weeks ago on a neighboring ranch nearby my ranch, and you can see the typical situation in the Chihuahuan desert, people feeding the cows. Now think about for a moment that it's not only what we destroy within our land, but that we are promoting the opening of more farming land around us as we bring the feed to our cows. Next one, please. So we know that total rest is not really good for grasslands. Grasslands need to be managed with animals, with grazing animals. It's not as a humid or more humid environment. Next one, please. So we have tried mechanical work, but we don't really like much the result, like this one. Next one, please. So we try to minimize the disturbance of the soil. Now we know that there's a lot of places where we're fighting with the woody plants, but as you can see here in my ranch, we actually work for what we want, and we just forget about the woody plants, and that's kind of the results that we have got there. Next one, please, Matt. So just to take you a little bit to a tour to the ranch, imagine that you're driving 40 miles and then you get into my neighbor's ranch, and we already have 6 inches of rain in summer, and that's how the ranch looks like last year. Next one. Now you jump into my ranch on the same day, and that's a result of proper management with the same amount of rainfall. Next one, sir, please. Now we're back again in the spring of last year. Again, we took that road again. Then we, on the upper left, is a continuous grazing on a communal land or ejido. And then the next one on the upper right is my neighbor with rotational grazing. When I say rotational grazing, I mean a few cows on large paddocks. And the bottom one is my ranch. All of those pictures taken on the same day. So it makes a big difference. Next one, please. Now, on spring last year, on my neighbor on the south fence line, mine is on the green side. My neighbor is on the farther side. So you can see the difference that really management does in order to get effective rainfall. Next one. Same spot, right side, my ranch, left side, my neighbor's ranch. Now for us ranchers, one of the nice things about it is that we can run 3 times more cattle on the same acreage, and even though we can grow more grass. Next one, please, sir. I like this picture. It was actually taken on the same day. My neighbor's ranch on the left, my ranch on the right. So you can see how much of a difference the properly cows can do in the desert. Same rainfall, yeah. Now a closer look at the tobosa grass, which is a species that we have in the Chihuahuan desert. That picture Again, winter, same grass species, left side or ranch and right side or neighbor's ranch. See the difference? Just think about it all, what it does with the wildlife and life in general. Next one. So closer look on both grasses. Left one, my neighbor, right, my ranch. You can see the quality of the grass. So we should really not only talking about the cover or the amount of grass, but also the quality of the grass that we're producing for all the living organisms. Next one. Now, last year was a challenging year in the Chihuahua Desert because we have very late rains. Instead of getting the rains in the monsoon, we got the rains in September and October. And this is a result of our ranch before during the summer. So you can see a lot of recovery took place even though we got late rains. Next one. Yeah. So we believe that because we deal with nature, nature is always in constant movement, and whatever you're doing, you're going forward and backwards, but it will depend on your understanding and management. Now we are strong believers of the cows and the power of the manure. See in this particular slide how we're promoting new grass, new seedlings coming up on that microclimate, which is cow pie. Next one. So obviously we don't really put any chemicals in our cows because then we're going to be end up killing these great workers, which are the dung beetles. Next one. So this is the work of the dung beetles on a side view. See how they fertilize the soil. It's just pretty amazing. Next one. Talking about the water cycle, the infiltration. These two spots, the lower corner is my ranch, the upper corner is a neighboring ranch. And we are able to infiltrate, thanks to management, 18 inches of rain per hour. On the upper left, we were able to infiltrate only 2 inches. That means that we can infiltrate, if we were able to do so on the whole 30,000 acres, we would be able to provide the water needs of 100,000 people for a full year. So we're not only talking about the grasslands, but the water capacity. Next one, please. So for us as ranchers and also in general, we need to work, next one please, on the genetics. So we really need animals that can thrive on the resources that the ranch is providing without having to bring anything from the outside. See, you can see examples of cows adapted to their environments. Next one, please. This is a my ranch where they pretty much ate all the cactus prickly pear. We don't even burn these pines. I hope there's nobody here from PETA, but well, you know, trying to get the cows adapted. Next one. So the thing is that people are very willing to do it once when they see a benefit on it. Next one. For example, in our case, on the Sierra part of the ranch, on the mountain range, this is how we do it, how we fence it, how we work certain spots. Next one. See the willingness of people to even use this temporal electric fence on a pretty rocky slope, even using these yuccas as posts. Next one, please. Now we know, we understand that 100% of the rainfall, 60% comes from the sea and 40% we are responsible for that other 40%. So next one, please. So what we have seen, where you see that mark is where the ranch is located. What we have seen in the last 2-3 years is a little bit more rain at the ranch. Does that mean that we're pulling more rains because we're extending the green season? I do believe so. Next one. I mean, I'm not saying that only it rains in my ranch, but it's a thing that we're seeing lately, that we're getting a little bit more rain. Next one, please. So from our experience, we like conservation organizations to work on ranchers that already are committed to somehow or on their way. We like to work in sync with nature, and we like to put some focus on our investments on the most productive areas and try to build corridors, which I think you do. We don't fight nature with toxics. We don't promote total waste, and we try not to disturb the soil with mechanical work. Next one, please. So we can see a lot of wildlife at the ranch. So the wildlife is increasing for all the animals under the ground, above the ground, and on the air. Next one, please. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Great to be able to hear these different stories and perspectives and from different parts of the continent right now. So thank you, Alejandro, for joining us and sharing all the images with us. We appreciate it. Monica, I would love to bring you up. And I know folks out in delegate attendee land, I know we're nearing the 2 o'clock hour. As you can see, lots of voices to cover and lots of really informative information that we want to set up. So I do apologize that we're going to be going over. We really want to hear from Monica and Bill Milton as well. And so Monica, thank you for being back. I think your land acknowledgement PowerPoint's up now. I think you may want to go to the other one, and I have it ready for you too if needed. So let me know.
Can you upload it?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm getting out of it. How do I stop share? There we go.
Yeah. Give me just a second if you want to jump in and start. But thank you for being back with us today. We appreciate both roles you're playing today.
Sure. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everybody, to Matt and Tammy and everybody for inviting the Indigenous voice and weaving us in all of the presentations. It's sometimes I think I have to be careful what I ask for. I really wanted the Indigenous voice in there and that perspective, and I think that we're capturing it. So again, thank you for doing that. As said earlier, I'm Monica Turkelson. I work with the World Wildlife Fund, and I work out of Pine Ridge Reservation here in southwestern South Dakota. So I've been able to do some work with conservation and really enjoy it. But one of the things I wanted to share, did you find it, Matt?
Yep, it's coming up now. Sorry about that. I had your land acknowledgement one up as well. So here we go. All right, thanks everybody.
Okay, so I wanted to share this. This is tribal land ownership from an Ogallala tribal member perspective, and that would be me. I don't think that I can share the story of any other tribal members and their perspective. So I made sure that I emphasize that this is my perspective and from this area. But I think that there is a lot of commonalities with tribes across the regions that we're talking about. And so I thought that it would be really important when we talked about the question, what does successful grassland conservation look like for me? I thought I would share a little bit of information and background initially so that we can really talk about that question. So can you go to the next one? I got to move myself. I can't. I just wanted to share just a little bit of background. So after the Treaty of 1851 was created, you see this map on the side here. This was a huge area. I think it was 70 million acres was given to tribal members. And I hate saying given, but this was the area that tribals, all the tribes and the ones that we talked about, done a roll call with, had this area. And this was the original areas of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, and Crow. And, there was just a lot of them. So this is the 1851 treaty that shows the land that after that treaty that we had to utilize. And the other concept, can you just go back one more, go back to that real quick? one of the things that was really hard for us as Indigenous people to understand, and is still really hard to understand, is that one cannot own their own grandmother. When individuals talked about land ownership, and it's showing itself in its complications today, but we really don't have the concept of being able to put up a fence and say that this 60 acres is mine, because we really don't have that concept of land ownership as a European American would. So, okay, go to the next. I wanted to share, this is our World Wildlife Fund's map of the Great Plains, but what it does is it shows all of the current reservations that are in place in the Great Plains area that we work in. But I wanted to share that the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887 is what created it from that first map that I shared with the 1851 treaty. Then we had a Dawes Allotment Act that created the reservations as you see them today. So the land base shrunk from that 70 million to roughly, I think it's 10 million acres with all of these 16 tribes in this area. In that Dawes Allotment Act, what it did is it provided to each head of family 1/4 of a section, to each single person over 18 years of age 1/8 of a section, to each orphan child under 18 years of age 1/8 of a section, and to each other single person under 18 years now living, or who may be born prior to the date of the order of the president directing allotment of the lands 1/16 of a section. So that's, I think that's 40 acres. So, you know, that's what individuals, so they took that whole piece, they done these allotments, they shrunk them down to these reservations, and then they gave individuals allotments, and then that's what we were given, 1/8 of a section, 1/4 of a section, you know, so it just, and that's what we were supposed to go forward to. And then they opened up that piece to the Homestead Act. So that shrunk our land bases down even more. Go to the next one. This map here, it's real hard to see, but it's an original allotment map. And what that is every square there you see, it has a name on it. So they just went through and they said, okay, Monica, this is yours and you're entitled to 80 acres and we're going to put you out in the Badlands out there, and you go forth, be prosperous and live that way. And so, because we didn't understand land ownership that way. We didn't have wills, we didn't write wills, and we really weren't able to live on those pieces of land in a lot of cases too. So what happened is, if I got that 80 acres originally, I would have children and then they would inherit it. And because I wouldn't write a will, let's say I had 4 children, then that 80 acres is now owned by 4 children without any separation or anything. And then another generation. So what it has led to was this really intense fractionation on Indian lands. So that original 80-acre allotment that I may have received back in the day could have over 100 heirs on it. And nobody really knows who owns what piece, or you can't. And so what we get, instead of a title, what we see when we go into the Bureau of Indian Affairs, who manages that as a trust responsibility, what we get is a TSR, we call it. It's a title status report. So when I look at that title status report, we look at Monica Turkelson. She owns this land of section 1158, or tract 1158. And on that, it'll say that I own 0.0001%. So that's how we track the land, is through title status reports, and that fractionation has become a really huge issue. And what that's led to was the economic status on Pine Ridge Reservation. What they did, the Bureau of Indian Affairs created range units. And range units are comprised of allotted individual land, tribal land, and can be fee land. So fee land is land that was taken out of trust. So these range units are set up and designed to hold X number of cattle or livestock. So they drew a range unit around an area of land, and they say, okay, this range unit runs, you can run 200 head of livestock on here for 6 months. So then they take that, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs manages all of that land. And that's really the economic status for Pine Ridge Reservation, is the range units. And what it's led to for us as individual landowners is we've really lost control of our individual land. So if I wanted to build a house on my land that I know I own 0.0001% of that 80 acres, it's nearly impossible, because then we have to get signatures from all of the other heirs. And that could also be a tribe that owns part of that land, because a tribal member can sell to the tribe. So we've really lost control of our individual land. And I think that what it has also led to is, if you come to Pine Ridge today, there is absolutely no conservation area on Pine Ridge at all. So I think that's what it's led to. And I think that it becomes important to understand this. And even though we're a reservation of 2.7 million acres, we really don't have any conservation, and we feel like we don't have any control over our own land. Next. So I wanted to answer that question. Conservation to me looks like taking communally owned land and creating a conservation area. And this is the work I'm doing right now with World Wildlife Fund. So we have this huge area that is part of a national park, but it's all tribally owned land, and it's 133,000 acres. And there's range units that were created on that, but it's all communally owned land, meaning it belongs to all of us as tribal members. And I believe that this is one of the ways that we on a reservation can really look at creating conservation areas. And I think that it's also another way that we can look at it is, we have to look at competing for land. That means that we would have to, if we have an operator leasing a range unit, that would be a great conservation area if that's something we wanted to look at. Then we would have to compete with our tribal and non-tribal livestock owners. We'd have to pay a lease, and then we'd create a conservation area. It's a possibility, but then we look at competing for land in that scenario. Next. Greatest concerns and what works. Some of the concerns I have as a tribal member is we elect a tribal council, and we elect a president and a vice president here on Pine Ridge. And right now, I think that the concern is that elected officials aren't knowledgeable regarding grassland conservation. And I think one of the really important things, and I always try to talk about it, is our traditional medicinal plants that grow here. And I think that that lack of knowledge of conservation in general is a big concern. Another concern I have is tribes not included in this discussion and resources, including knowledge of current systems not shared with tribes. You know, we're looking at promoting the Recovering America's Wildlife Act right now. Tribes weren't included in that prior, and states were. And that's another big concern, is the lack of unstable governments, because we elect every 2 years, but also it affects our funding cycles. So we're not able to project projects forward for X number of years because we don't have the right kind of funding to do that. I got to move my picture again. That's all I see. Another concern is, like I said earlier, we're having to compete amongst ourselves for land. So those are some of the concerns I think that I would reflect in looking at conservation. But that's not all. There's some successes. And I have seen Sean Grassel with the Laura Brusso tribe. He is a tribal program, and he has acquired some leases, and he's done some CRP programming and has created some conservation areas. So there's some successes there that have happened. And I think that points to partnerships and collaborations are really important, and they help bring in that information. And as I listened to Chief talk, you know, he pointed that out, and I think that's really right, but I think that it's got to be brought into Indian country, and we really need to figure out how to work with those. Another success, individual tribal members pushing local legislation. I think this is really important. It's something that we're trying to do with, we established a working group. We're moving forward. We're trying to do a declaration of priorities from a survey that was done, but pushing local legislation to create conservation areas and especially preservation of our medicinal plants, I think is going to be really important, especially this time with COVID. I think that has made that really apparent. And I think that what that is reclaiming lifeways. A lot of people use the word culture, but we call it lifeways, reclaiming lifeways and putting those into practice. So if we establish a conservation area, we're really reclaiming a lifeway, and we can continue to use those medicinal plants far into the future. And I think that's something that, and we're talking about roadmaps that need to be considered. You know, those are really important issues for us as Indigenous people. Next. And I guess that's it. That's all that I had there. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I really enjoyed providing information. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Again, really appreciate it. Thank you for your involvement. Thank you for helping to engage a lot of different voices in the roadmap. We appreciate it. And people are definitely staying on, which is great. Thank you, everybody. This is an awesome. We're just getting so many different ideas and perspectives and great things for the delegates to be thinking about here early on in our process. And so, Bill, I'd love to bring it over to you to close us out. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great, thanks, Matt. So yeah, my name is Bill Melton. I ranch in central Montana, and I'm quite honored to be part of this panel and the program today. I'm just somewhat awed by the efforts people are making to try and make things work. I guess a little bit about my history is my father bought a place, Montana, in '56, and I'm now on a different place and have been here for over 42 years. And actually, a lot of the practices we apply on our ranch to improve grasslands and habitat are, you know, in many respects akin to what Alejandro shared. And I just tip my hat to that gentleman for the incredible work he's doing down there. And I'd actually, with the time I have and the patience for people to stay on, I'd like to spend less time about the conservation work we're doing on our individual ranch, which I think has been significant. But I've learned early on that I could have the most successful ranch in the world, but if my neighbors are failing, I will fail. That my success and resilience is dependent on the resilience of the community I live in and the communities that surround those communities. So in recent years, you know, I do a lot of collaborative work. I facilitate with a lot of groups here in central Montana. And what we're learning is there's an opportunity of how we approach these issues in terms of, I guess there's two questions that I was just, as I've been listening, I keep changing what I want to share, but I think two of the most important questions that I've been trying to respond to is, how do we leverage our shared intelligence? How do we act collaboratively to where just the information I've learned today, how do I use that information with others to actually advance something that's useful for all of us? And then the other one, which I ask almost every day in my own personal practice, especially looking at what we're experiencing in the world, is, well, what is my appropriate response when I'm dealing with all this? And how do I work with others to create an appropriate response? So I'm going to focus on, there's so much to talk about, but I'm going to focus on something fairly specific in terms of a project we're working on here in central Montana. And I'm actually going to propose some actions that coming out of the chute of this first meeting for you delegates to, you know, I'm going to throw out something here that I hope can be tested. And this is the project we've been working on over the last 4 or 5 years. It's called the Rangeland Monitoring Group Project. And it arose out of a few of us, you know, just getting a few people together and asking the question, is our landscape healthy? And what does healthy look like? And how would we know if it's getting more healthy or less healthy? And it's all kind of amazing to me, all of us who are doing some great conservation work can't really answer that question. Or at least we can't answer it in a way that the public would trust that our answer is believable. And so at the heart of that, of course, is how do we monitor? You know, how do we track indicators on the landscape and also in our own community interactions to be able to track that something we determine is important is actually improving. So actually, this has been a very sort of slow, patient process, but over the last 3 or 4 years, a circle of people have continued to keep coming into this conversation about, well, how do we do community landscape monitoring? Our ranch has been doing monitoring for 20 years, and we can observe, you know, important positive changes that we can respond to and continue to make improvements, hopefully. But again, you know, I don't own my life. My actions are important, but I don't really own much. And because I'm so dependent on other people, our ranch is remarkably dependent on so many partners that to think that I'm responsible for much is a bit of a delusion. So this idea of bringing people together to kind of look, well, how do we know our communities actually, our community landscape as well as our community is actually improving? So over the last 4 years, and we kind of took a lesson from Point Blue Conservation Science initially, and we've obviously been working with the Bird Conservancy, is, you know, a number of years ago, they came up with this range monitoring network where they looked at 3 indicators, soil, plants, and birds, as a way to assess trend lines in terms of the health of an individual ranch. And I was quite intrigued with that because we were trying to figure out how we might do that. What indicators would you look like? So we spent a lot of time visiting with those folks. Of course, we didn't have the resources Point Blue had. They have like 140 scientists, or even, you know, Tammy, your crew. I mean, you guys have I'm always amazed how many staff exist in these groups. And, but the idea was how to take this individual monitoring and create a platform where a number of ranchers in a community, working with agencies, working with nonprofits, could share that accumulated data that's being gathered in multiple places, and then have some way of capturing that data and creating a template so we could all look at it together and say, well, what the hell's going on? I mean, if I look at the last 4 years in our particular grassland, you know, we had a drought in 2017. The next year we had this explosion of Japanese brome that no one knew where in the hell it came from, even though it had been here for years. Then we had this huge outbreak of sweet clover that actually in some places killed sagebrush because it absorbs so much moisture. And then this year we have a huge hopper outbreak. You know, we're living in these extremely variable landscapes, and how do we respond in a way that we can become more resilient and more adaptive? And I think the way you do that is through collaboration, which is exactly what we're trying to do with this project that Tammy and others have been putting together. So in this rangeland monitoring group process, so we have been working on these indicators of, like, you know, who can measure the soil quality, who can measure plants, who can measure the birds. So we're working with a number of partners, and Bird Conservancy is one, but our core thing on birds has been working with Partners for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Marissa Sather is kind of the point person up north of the Missouri River. And we've actually gotten ranchers who weren't that familiar with birds, you know, in our area to kind of be willing to allow people to come and to monitor the birds, and to begin to appreciate that sharing that information and actually seeing how those birds are doing would be a way for them to create actually their understanding of their place, but also a way to communicate to others how their management is actually dealing with these important species. And what's been very surprising is, well, I don't know, it wasn't surprising to me, but a lot of people who always get kind of freaked out about working with landowners, you know, and because, you know, they, you know, all this kind of tension that sometimes occurs with environmentalists and things like that. These landowners were got quite engaged in learning some of these birds that they've been around for their whole life and didn't really know about them. So now, you know, you're getting these friendships between people who are coming on the land, you know, that are doing the monitoring. And it's just interesting. We're probably up to about 20 survey sites in our particular area, and we're trying to integrate those with what Bird Conservancy is doing. But the point I'm trying to share here is that how do we create a community monitoring process that's respectful, that's transparent, that actually creates some really functional data and engages landowners in the context of what the heck is really going on here and why they need to be involved and what role can they really play in understanding this context and actually be a player. And we're just about to launch this thing, and we're operating on almost $0, but we've gotten some people at MSU, Montana State, in that area to start building some kind of data templates. So those of us who have soil data, that have plant data, that have bird data, and we're looking at remote sensing, how can we aggregate that in a way that can be shared amongst a group of us and begin drawing some ideas of like what's happening on the landscape and begin to draw in some trend lines. So we have one network we've just about to get established here in Musselshell and Petroleum in Garfield County in the central part of the state. But we have 3 or 4 other communities in Montana that are intrigued with this process. And if we can figure out the template of how to do this and how to share the data and how to deal with landowners being concerned about sharing data, this thing could expand. And I've shared with Tammy and others that, if we are going to protect and save this vast grassland, we're going to have to create a vast network of people who are interconnected, sharing information in an honest, exploratory way, so that we can leverage more quickly what the hell's going on and what we can do with actions in our own places to kind of advance our particular geography. Now, where I think we have a problem, this is my proposal. It's like, so NRCS, and I don't know if Matt is still with us. NRCS, I mean, they're the big player in the field. I mean, they're the big capital player that's providing a lot of dollars for conservation. And I've been involved and engaged with our NRCS folks from the get-go. And I've always been respectfully, but somewhat critical that they really don't do any serious monitoring. They don't really, I mean, a lot of conservation is occurring because a lot of money is being spent. That doesn't necessarily compute to doesn't always compute that there's a lot of great conservation going on the ground. So an example of what recently happened is, actually Bird Conservancy, had planted a wonderful lady up in the county in central Montana who helped us do monitoring, but it was almost impossible to get her to leave her day job of being a partner with NRCS working on kind of an eco projects. It just spent like 2 or 3 days monitoring birds. It's like, why can't NRCS, put that into their work plan that in the month of June, can these people just work a few days to monitor so we can actually see if we're making some progress on the land? And so my proposal here, and I apologize if I'm maybe scattered here, is that just imagine, because Point Blue does this, I know, and Bird Conservancy is doing this too, and Pheasants Forever is doing it. They are embedding staff in the NRCS. But what if we could really expand this, that we'd have multiple offices of NRCS that actually put into their work plan that they would have people who would be doing monitoring. And yes, we would be doing that struggle of what we should be monitoring, what are the indicators we can agree to, but that is really important work to do. And we've been working with World Wildlife Fund on trying to agree on what those core indicators that would be appreciated or accepted across a number of different agencies and NGOs and landowners. But just imagine if you have that infrastructure already in place, and if we actually made this an important part of this whole program, it's like, how do we create monitoring over this large landscape in a way that's really functional and allows effective networking and shared data amongst us? And to me, it just seems like it wouldn't be a huge leap to do that. And we are beginning to have discussions. In fact, we have one this August with our state people about, how can we actually advance this? So, there's so much I'd like to share, but I just think if we're going to save grasslands, we got to know what the heck's going on, and we have to monitor. But monitoring in and of itself, I think, is useless if it's not tied to a dialogue. If it's not tied to a collaborative dialogue where different people with different perspectives are looking at this information and having some kind of discussion, even argument or debate about what that data is telling us. That kind of interaction of diversity with real data on a process that we all agree on, I think could really advance our understanding of our place and of the places of others. And again, back to this issue of shared intelligence, which is not my term, it's Peter Donovan, who works with us, who put together this nonprofit called the Soil Carbon Coalition, who we're working with on soils. Is like, he's a holistic practitioner, and he just makes this case that, you know, if we're going to get through so many of these issues, we somehow have to leverage our shared experience, our shared wisdom, our shared effort in a much more useful way than we're doing today. And so my offering to this effort in the last 2+ hours is, how can we, coming out of this, create a program of an expanded, agreed monitoring process that's also tied to a dialogue and a way to share the data, so that I can really plug into Miles in Canada, or Alejandro or Monica over in Dakotas, and really understand what they're dealing with and what's happening in their landscapes, and how do we share amongst ourselves what actions we're taking and what's the cause and effect of those and what's the results of those. And when we're doing stupid things, how do we change? When we're doing good things, how do we advance those? So Matt, I probably talked too much, but I could talk for quite a bit on this subject. I'm always been amazed why ranchers have been so resistant to monitoring. Well, I do know they're scared. They think monitoring is gonna get somehow it's going to come back and bite them. And I think if I was to name one resource our ranch needs to cultivate and wants to enhance, it's public trust. That is a fundamental activity we do at our ranch, and working with partners is, how do we increase public trust so the public actually appreciates that what we're doing on this land is not only good for us, it's good for them, it's good for wildlife, it's good for plants. And if they can look at our whole community and say, I trust those guys out there in central Montana, how do we help those guys, you know, be successful in a really difficult economic environment? So I'll stop there because I'm just kind of going off. But thanks, this is great.
Bill, that was wonderful. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And such a great example from your talk and Monica's and Alejandro's and Miles about what's happening on the ground, but these ways to elevate it up to a scale that I can already see going into the roadmap in some different ways. And so I hope folks are getting a sense of what we're trying to accomplish and what we're after with these speaker sessions. We got to hear directly from the land today, and next Thursday we're going to be hearing more from other sectors that are working out on the land and some leaders in those sectors, and we'll hear some more perspectives from the different countries we're working with. And then on July 23rd, we'll hear from our last set of speakers. And if you need to follow along, I posted our web address in the chat, but this is pretty key to just stay aboard on the website. If you ever need kind of the up-to-date information, like today we posted this banner so you could get right onto YouTube if the Zoom links weren't working or something got lost. Our agenda is over here that you can follow along with some of the progress and who's going to be up in the next few days, and just a reminder about dates. We're trying to send out calendar invites with live information as it becomes available. But please always feel that you can return back to this calendar and see what's going on. And we're updating that as much as possible. And then to know where we're going with the roadmap, again, all of these speakers are helping give delegates new ideas or things that they've thought about before, but we may now have an opportunity to have these shared dialogues in the way that Bill was presenting and talking about as well. And we will start to fill out the roadmap when we get to July 28th, thinking about priorities that could go here under these current potential solutions. Folks have been working on the vision through the survey. That's going to give us some common ground and direction about where we're headed. And so over time, over these work groups that we'll do informed by these speakers, we'll have an opportunity to fill this in and get a sense of where we're headed and how we know that we're getting there. So with that, Tammy, I don't know if you want to add anything at this point. And someone did, that's a good question. Someone just posted in the chat. I will say YouTube is open as a backup for delegates who are not able to access Zoom. But these speaker sessions, a lot of other people and leaders, colleagues of delegates also kind of wanted to see what was going on. And that is a public channel. And it's a great place for other people to get filled in about what we're doing. Obviously, this work involves and is going to include a lot more people than could attend as delegates during those work groups. But that doesn't mean this great information, amazing insights that we heard from so many great speakers and leaders today couldn't be helpful to a wider audience. So there's other people who want to tune in just to share. My dad was watching and checking it out and follow along. He's a conservationist from California, was really intrigued by this work. So it's open for people to see, and I think these ideas need to get out there, and that's part of the idea of the summit as well. Tammy, Arvind, any of the other panelists, lead panelists want to share anything before we wrap up?
Again, I just wanted to thank the panelists for the wonderful expertise and the voice that you provided and the guidance that you're helping us build this roadmap from. And I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and I look forward to everyone next week joining us. And just a reminder to send questions and answers so we can forward those to Chief Lord. We can bring those into the conversation as we move forward. And take care, everyone.
Yeah, so the agenda page, we will update with all the resources, the video from today, and any questions that were submitted or that are submitted over time. So look for that, and then we'll be sending out the email with information for next week's session and any other updates either tomorrow or Monday. And otherwise, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you all the delegates. Thank you again to the panelists. We really appreciate your time today. Take care out there.